On March 6, 2025, guests at the Rio República Hotel, located in Punta Cana in the Dominican province of La Altagracia, began their day without incident. They were ready to enjoy another day of sightseeing and relaxation on the Caribbean's pristine beaches. Later that same day, a group of 5 young American women returned to the hotel after a scheduled excursion. It was then that they realized one of their friends, who they assumed was still out on a date with a man she had recently met at the resort, had not yet returned to her room. Her unexplained absence sparked a massive investigation, resulting in one of the most extensive search operations ever carried out in the Dominican Republic. Search teams covered several kilometers along the coastline and expanded their efforts into the open sea. Numerous agencies participated in the inquiry, including the Dominican National Police, the Office of the Attorney General, the FBI, and a liaison from the U.S. Embassy. Even the United States Coast Guard joined the search in hopes of finding the missing young woman. Had the sea claimed her, or was there something more sinister behind her disappearance? Sudha Kanki was born on December 13, 2004 in India, to Subbarayu and Shidar B. Kanki. The family emigrated to the United States in 2006 when Sudha was just an infant. They obtained permanent residency and settled in the town of South Riding, Virginia. Sudha attended Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, where she began demonstrating her academic passions early on. After graduating, she enrolled at the University of Pittsburgh, majoring in biology and chemistry with the intention of pursuing a career in medicine. Friends described her as an exceptionally bright young woman, while her parents saw her as ambitious and focused. In her free time, Sudha was part of ABBAS, the university's South Asian a cappella fusion group. By 2025, she was 20 years old in her 3rd year of biology studies, living with her family in Chantilly, Virginia, located in Loudoun County, and spent much of her time with her close-knit group of university friends. Her father was confident that she would achieve her dreams and become a brilliant physician, but tragically, those aspirations were abruptly halted on a day no one could have foreseen. On March 3, 2025, Sudha left home for a spring break trip with 5 of her university friends: Raman Nidya, Anaya Chalakamari, Shalan Mengas, Shivani Biswanathan, and Komal Karim, all between 20 and 22 years old. Their destination was the Dominican Republic, specifically the Rio República Hotel, an all-inclusive 5-star resort frequently listed among the top 10 vacation spots. Everything seemed to suggest that Sudha and her friends were poised for an unforgettable week of sun and serenity before returning to their academic routines. For the first 2 days, the group took full advantage of the hotel's many amenities and activities. On the night of March 5, they visited a local nightclub before heading to the beach. That was the moment everything began to unravel. During the late hours, a power outage struck the hotel, disrupting some services. However, it didn't deter Sudha and her friends from continuing their night, drinking alcohol and socializing with fellow young tourists. By 2:00 a.m. on March 6, full power had been restored. Power had returned to the hotel, yet the celebration continued. At approximately 4:15 a.m., surveillance footage captured Sudha in the company of 8 people, her 5 close friends and 2 young men they had met earlier that day, Carter Johnson and Joshua Stephen Rape, both 22 years old. Joshua, originally from Iowa, was a student at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota. The connection between Joshua and Sudha appeared to be immediate and genuine, as the two were seen together throughout the night in several affectionate moments. Eventually, the entire group made their way down to the beach area of the Rio República resort. However, not long after, around 4:55 a.m., security cameras recorded Sudha's 5 friends and Carter returning to the hotel. Sudha, however, had remained on the beach with Joshua, seemingly enjoying a moment of privacy. Tragically, she never returned from that encounter. The following day, her friends prepared for a scheduled excursion and only then realized she was still missing. Initially, they assumed the rendezvous with Joshua had simply extended into the morning and proceeded with their plans. But by 4:00 p.m., when they returned to the hotel and she had still not appeared, concern turned into alarm. They immediately reported her disappearance to hotel staff, who contacted Dominican authorities. What began as a night of carefree fun had now escalated into a criminal investigation, the beginning of a nightmare. By 8:00 a.m., the Dominican police had received a call from the U.S. Embassy in Santo Domingo. The Loudoun County Sheriff's Office in Virginia, where Sudha lived, was also notified. From that point forward, an intensive search operation was launched, by land, air, and sea, in the surrounding areas of the hotel. Both the United States and India, Sudha's country of birth, offered support in the efforts. At the time, very few theories were available to explain what might have happened. Dominican President Luis Abinader held a press conference declaring that Sudha's disappearance was being treated as an accident and that a specialized maritime search operation was underway. However, the Attorney General's office clarified that no possibility was being ruled out, including abduction or human trafficking. Sudha's parents, Subarayudu and Shider Konki, were dissatisfied with the slow progress and limited information provided by authorities. Consequently, they flew from Virginia to Punta Cana accompanied by 2 family friends to get direct updates and personally investigate their daughter's whereabouts. Several aspects of the incident did not sit well with the Konki family. It was uncharacteristic, they said, for Sudha to leave her friends to spend the night alone with someone she had just met. Moreover, she had left behind both her wallet and cell phone, an oddity given her habit of always keeping her phone with her. Subarayudu later told CNN that he wanted the investigation to consider all scenarios, not just accidental drowning, including the potential for kidnapping or human trafficking. Regarding the drowning hypothesis, the Konki family expressed deep skepticism. They believed it was unlikely that their daughter could have survived more than 3 days at sea. In their view, the most plausible outcome was that Sudha had indeed drowned, and in the worst-case scenario, that she was no longer alive. Meanwhile, on Friday, March 7th, the National Police, in collaboration with the Public Prosecutor's Office, began formally questioning Sudha's friends as well as the 2 young men they had met on the night of March 5th. Most of them, however, were cleared of suspicion after surveillance footage confirmed they had returned to the hotel at 4:44 a.m. Joshua's case, however, stood apart. Although Sudha's friends were initially scheduled to return to the United States, they chose to remain in the Dominican Republic to assist with the ongoing search efforts. Investigators also questioned hotel guests and staff who might have seen Sudha in the hours leading up to her disappearance. Unfortunately, none provided information deemed significantly useful. Hotel management stated that beach access was always open and that security personnel were stationed throughout the premises and surrounding areas. For this reason, the possibility of an abduction initially seemed unlikely, yet days continued to pass with no trace of Sudha. Search operations intensified, involving helicopters, drones, divers, and ground units along the Bavaro coastline and neighboring regions. On March 10th, the Dominican National Police confirmed the formation of a special commission comprising the Attorney General's Office, the FBI, and the U.S. Embassy, marking the case as one of national concern, with no significant updates regarding Sudha's whereabouts. Attention soon shifted toward the last person known to have seen her alive, Joshua Rape. Surveillance videos showed Sudha and Joshua with their group near the hotel bar around 3:00 a.m., shortly before heading to the beach. In the footage, Sudha appeared wearing a white beach wrap, laughing and interacting closely with her friends. Joshua, in contrast, could be seen several meters away, staggering and hunched over, visibly intoxicated, as he stumbled across the grass in front of the bar. It was evident that both had consumed large amounts of alcohol, though authorities did not confirm whether intoxication may have contributed to Sudha's disappearance. The final surveillance footage showed Sudha and Joshua entering the beach area with their group, but there were no recordings showing them leaving. At 4:55 a.m., most of the group was seen returning to the hotel, yet Sudha remained on the beach with Joshua. Hours later, around 9:00 a.m., cameras captured Joshua leaving the coastal area alone. Without Sudha, at that point, Joshua was officially designated a person of interest, according to Tomas Julia, spokesperson for the sheriff's office, in a statement to NBC News. Julia clarified that this did not equate to being a criminal suspect, as the case was still being treated as a missing persons investigation, not a criminal matter. Nonetheless, Joshua was expected to provide a full account of his final moments with Sudha. On March 13th, the Public Prosecutor's Office initiated a formal investigative process involving Joshua, consisting of a 6-page document containing over 50 questions and conducted in the presence of 2 attorneys. During questioning, Joshua recounted meeting Sudha on the night of her disappearance. According to him, he and his friend Carter had initially been drinking at a party. Later, they went to the Ping lobby inside the hotel, where they introduced themselves to a group of young women, including Sudha. The two groups chatted casually and then went together to a bar where they continued drinking. Joshua claimed that it was he who suggested going to the beach. The entire group agreed, except for two of Sudha's friends. By that time, Sudha had already begun showing affection, kissing Joshua on the cheek as they walked together. When questioned about what happened on the beach, Joshua stated that he removed his shoes and socks, emptied his pockets, took off his shirt, placed his belongings on a chair, and entered the sea. Two of the young women chose not to swim, but Joshua, his friend, and the rest of the group did. At some point during the early morning hours, the others left, leaving Joshua alone with Sudha. Regarding that moment, Joshua said that once they re-entered the water, which reached up to their waists, they talked and then kissed. Suddenly, a wave crashed into them, dragging both out to deeper water. As they resurfaced, they tried calling for help, but the beach was deserted. Joshua began to feel exhausted and noticed that Sudha, too, was struggling to stay afloat. He claimed he tried to help her breathe, but doing so made it hard for him to breathe himself, and as a result, he swallowed large amounts of seawater. He even admitted that he may have briefly lost consciousness during that time. Joshua told local authorities that he had worked as a lifeguard in the past and attempted to swim with Sudha back to shore, but it was extremely difficult. He emphasized that his experience was limited to swimming pools, not the open ocean, which he described as far more dangerous. Nevertheless, he insisted that he managed to bring her back. According to his account, when they finally reached the shore, he laid Sudha down in front of him. She stood up to gather her belongings, which had been scattered by the tide. The last thing Joshua remembered seeing was Sudha walking in shallow water, about knee-deep. He said he asked if she was okay, but didn't hear her response as he began vomiting the seawater he had swallowed. When he looked up again, she was gone. He assumed she had retrieved her things and returned to her hotel room. Joshua then said he fell asleep on a beach chair and woke up several hours later, woken by the sunlight and mosquito bites. Surveillance footage from the Riu Hotel later showed him leaving the beach alone. Close to 9:00 a.m., he went to his friend's room to retrieve his phone, then returned to his own room to sleep. When Joshua awoke, Carter asked if he had seen Sudha. Joshua replied that he believed she was in her room. Carter then informed him that Sudha had never returned to her room, a revelation that, according to Joshua, shocked him. He had assumed she had been safe at the hotel for hours. Although Joshua was questioned multiple times, he was never identified as a suspect. In fact, the circumstances appeared to favor his account, leading to his release without charges. A hotel spokesperson later stated that during the early hours of Sudha's disappearance, red flags had been posted along the beach, warning of strong currents and high waves. In support of this, Agustin Murillo Rodriguez, Commander General of the Dominican Republic Navy, told CNN that sea conditions that night were indeed hazardous, with unusually high waves. According to Joshua's testimony, it was one of those waves that pulled them into the sea, an explanation that effectively distanced him from any criminal suspicion in connection with Sudha's disappearance. Michael Chapman, sheriff of Loudoun County, Virginia, also spoke to CNN, stating that Joshua had been very forthcoming with investigators and that no inconsistencies had been detected in his testimony. Nevertheless, Joshua was not permitted to leave the Dominican Republic, and the search for Sudha continued to escalate rapidly. The National Police dispatched teams to the beach at night on at least 2 occasions to monitor the movement of the tides, in hopes of determining where a body might drift if someone had drowned, and where the waves were breaking. Yet, no trace of Sudha was found. On March 13, authorities announced that search operations were ongoing, though there were still no concrete leads regarding her whereabouts. 2 detectives from the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office, where Sudha lived with her family, traveled to the Dominican Republic to assist in the investigation. They joined a multi-agency task force composed of the FBI, the Dominican Navy, the Army, firefighters, the 911 Emergency Service, and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Office of Investigations. At the time, officials stated that it remained unclear whether Sudha's disappearance was accidental or the result of foul play. Juan Salas, Director of Civil Defense, revealed that investigators had not located any of Sudha's clothing. However, officials confirmed that no signs of blood or violence were found at the beach where she had last been seen with Joshua, further reinforcing the view that he was not involved. Meanwhile, authorities began analyzing Sudha's phone and text messages, though those inquiries also failed to yield any clues about her location. The search area was then expanded beyond the immediate beach, and the sheriff's office submitted a request to Interpol to issue a yellow notice, an international alert used to notify authorities worldwide of a missing person, in case Sudha had crossed into another country. She was described as 160 centimeters tall, approximately 5 feet 3, weighing 60 kilograms, 132 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. Sheriff Michael Chapman stated that their operating assumption was that Sudha was still alive, and he emphasized that his team was committed to exhausting every possible lead, and believed they had done so. However, Sudha's parents, who were still in Punta Cana, ultimately ended their personal search efforts and returned home to Virginia. Meanwhile, the case, which many had already begun to describe as one of the largest rescue operations ever conducted on Dominican soil, was drawing unprecedented media attention. But the pressing question remained: how much longer could the search realistically continue, especially now that even her parents seemed to have lost hope? Sudha's disappearance was also being compared to previous incidents in the region, including other missing tourist cases under similarly mysterious circumstances. In January, 4 foreign nationals had drowned at the same beach in Punta Cana where Sudha was last seen. They had been dragged by strong currents into an area known as Arena Gorda, located near the Rio Republica Hotel. This incident reignited concerns about safety in the area. To make matters worse, in recent years, numerous disappearances of tourists across Caribbean beaches had also been reported. In 2019, an American citizen vanished in the same region, and his whereabouts remained unknown. Then, in 2022, a young Canadian woman disappeared under similar circumstances in Punta Cana, although her body was discovered days later in nearby waters. These comparisons generated significant public concern, prompting Dominican President Luis Abinader to issue new statements regarding the case. He referred to Sudha's disappearance as a tragic incident, but emphasized that the Dominican Republic is not only among the safest countries in Latin America, but also one of the safest in the world across all measures. He noted that the country welcomes over 11 million visitors annually, with no extraordinary incidents typically reported. Furthermore, the Dominican government reiterated its commitment to tourist safety and pledged to continue mobilizing all necessary resources to clarify the situation and locate the young woman. At that time, Dominican authorities continued to maintain that the leading hypothesis was accidental drowning. However, the public prosecutor's office stated that investigations remained ongoing to determine whether any factors beyond an accident may have contributed to the incident. The Loudoun County Sheriff's Office in Virginia released a statement urging caution against speculation, encouraging the public to await the results of a full investigation before drawing unfounded conclusions. Despite this appeal, Sudha's family, overwhelmed by the anguish of her prolonged absence, made a heart-wrenching request that had once seemed unimaginable. On March 18, 2025, her parents formally petitioned authorities to have their daughter declared legally deceased. In a signed letter, they outlined the reasons behind this painful decision. By that point, Sudha's sarong had been found on a beach chair with no signs of violence, and her other clothing was later recovered from a nearby beach, the same area where she was last seen. These findings aligned with the Dominican authorities' conclusion that she had likely drowned. The family concurred with this theory, especially given that Joshua, the last person to see her alive, had fully cooperated with the investigation, and no evidence of foul play had been uncovered. The letter further explained that initiating the legal process to declare Sudha deceased would allow the family to begin mourning and to manage the legal and emotional matters arising from her absence. Although no official declaration could truly ease their grief, they hoped this step would help them begin to heal and preserve Sudha's memory with dignity. Following the family's statement, the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office issued another communiqué. While noting that the final decision rested with Dominican authorities, they expressed full support for the family and pledged continued cooperation. Nonetheless, despite ongoing review of the evidence and investigative findings, the request could not proceed legally, as Dominican Civil Code stipulates that a person must be missing for 4 full years before being declared legally absent. Furthermore, the legal process to formalize this status can only be approved 1 year after such a request is filed. Moreover, in order for a person to be legally declared deceased, a body must be presented to a forensic medical examiner. In that regard, Sudha's case remained a complete mystery. Meanwhile, Santo Joshua was confined to a hotel room under police surveillance. Though not formally under arrest, he was required to remain within those four walls daily, awaiting escort by police to attend interviews. He was not even allowed to communicate freely with his loved ones, as his phone had been confiscated. To make matters worse, local authorities had also seized his passport. Joshua's parents decided to intervene, filing a formal complaint about the irregular conditions their son was being subjected to. They also reported that Joshua had been taken to the police station for repeated questioning, on some occasions for as long as 6 hours, during which he was made to recount the same story over and over again. Without the presence of certified English interpreters or legal counsel, Joshua himself petitioned the court, seeking release from his imposed restrictions. He argued that the prosecution, the police, and the hotel had all infringed upon his rights by detaining him without cause. He also stated that he had met with Sudha's mother, who embraced him and thanked him for trying to save her daughter after the first wave hit. Appearing before the court, Joshua expressed a strong desire to return home and see his family. While he acknowledged that he had stayed to assist in the investigation into Sudha's disappearance, 10 days had now passed, and the situation appeared interminable. He felt he had done everything in his power and believed there was nothing more he could contribute. All he wanted was to resume his life. On March 18, 2025, his legal team filed a habeas corpus petition, asserting that since Joshua was being treated as a witness rather than a suspect, he should not be subjected to such restrictions. Judge Edwin Rijo ruled that the constraints imposed on Joshua, requiring him to remain under strict police watch for 11 days at the Riu Hotel in Punta Cana, violated Dominican law. Following the ruling, Joshua's attorneys, speaking alongside him, expressed deep gratitude to the Dominican judiciary and all institutions involved for upholding the rule of law and respecting his fundamental rights as a foreign citizen in the Dominican Republic. Subsequently, the public prosecutor's office informed Joshua that he could retrieve his passport. However, due to privacy concerns, he chose to apply for a new one through the U.S. consulate, which was issued the following day. On March 19, he returned home. His friend Carter, who had also had his passport confiscated and was present during the early hours of the disappearance, left the country at the same time. On March 28, Judge Rijo issued a written ruling outlining the legal rationale behind accepting the habeas corpus petition filed on Joshua's behalf. This decision formally concluded the legal proceedings against the young man, confirming, at least in legal terms, that Joshua bore no responsibility for Sudha's disappearance. Still, many questions remained unanswered. At the time this video was made, Dominican authorities continued to divide the search zones and deploy drones across designated sectors. Drone operators monitored live footage, which was uploaded to a central command center to help identify any anomalies in the ocean. The search had extended both offshore and inland, yet no trace of Sudha had been found. Authorities continued to uphold the leading theory that the young woman may have drowned at Arena Gorda Beach, where the hotel is located. Although the Attorney General's Office of the Dominican Republic remains intent on investigating whether there may be more behind her disappearance, the young woman's parents continue to assert that she drowned and are urging prosecutors to authorize the death certificate so they can finally close the most painful chapter of their lives. The case continues to reverberate through sensationalist media outlets, reaching a point where a Dominican investigator publicly shared his own theory on live television. He speculated that, since security footage captured Joshua taking a selfie with Sudha, it could suggest he was showing her to a group of potential kidnappers as their next target. The fact that Joshua had once been part of a wrestling team in high school, an unrelated detail that was made public, led the investigator to further theorize that he might have physically harmed the young woman, despite there being no evidence of violence in the area where she was last seen. To date, however, this theory holds no legal weight. Meanwhile, the Dominican Association of Families of the Disappeared has reported that, between June 2022 and February 2025, a total of 2,240 people were reported missing in the country. Of these, 1,054 were later found dead, among them children, adolescents, and teenagers. Contrary to official claims, the Dominican Republic is far from being a safe place. Sudha, a young woman who dreamed of becoming a doctor and saving lives, set out on a peaceful vacation, only to become another unanswered question buried in dozens of open investigations. We bid you all a warm farewell, and if you haven't subscribed yet, we warmly invite you to do so and become part of this growing community.